Okay, we are back again. Tales from the Cassette. I'm Jeff Beach.
I'm Joey Graves.
And if I'm counting right, I believe this is episode number 5.
I believe you're correct.
I believe I'm right. Okay, episode 5. So we are rolling. This is milestones. So next to be the 10, and then 100, and then the thousands. So we're on the move. And we are full of content. And this week we have decided to talk about the first 5 Night Ranger albums. One of my favorite bands from the 80s, still one of my favorite bands. So they're still on the road, still touring, still sound great, still putting out new music on a regular basis. In fact, I saw some reference that they may have even more new music coming sometime soon. So I love some of their newer music. We're not going to talk about that tonight, but I will say their album, I forget what year it was, but Growing Up in California is a great Night Ranger album.
It is a good album. Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
And sounds a lot like their stuff from the 80s. And if you like their 80s music, you would like that album. But we're going to talk about the 80s, and we're going to talk about our top 5. But before we do, let's find out what's going on in our lives. You listening to any good music nowadays?
Well, the last few days I've been listening to nothing but Night Ranger.
Yep. I went on Spotify, which is where I listen to most of my music. And thanks to your recommendations and making me listen to certain music, it said, here's music more like Harem Scarum. I was like, oh yeah, thank you for that, Joey. So now I've got Harem Scarum references on my Spotify, and so which is fine.
Okay.
I'm trying to think what I listened to. Oh, you know what? After the last podcast, I listened to the Hooters album.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Since we talked about that, and I need to do a better job posting on our social media when I'm listening to stuff so we can get some more interaction, and I need to do that. So I've been saving that album cover so I can post it.
Yeah, well, there's another band that is more modern. They're called Heat.
Heat.
And the lead
Like
singer, Eric Gronwall, he was the lead singer of Skid Row for a while, the last few years.
Yep.
But he actually was from a band called Heat, a Swedish band.
Okay.
I guess it's H.E.A. T. And the album that I think is a great album, it's called Into the Great Unknown.
Okay.
It was released in 2017.
Okay. Newer music.
Newer music for me, especially me. I'm stuck in the 80s and the 90s. Yeah. But check it out.
Okay.
It's a little, some of it can be a little harder edged, but he is a fantastic singer.
You are messing my entire Spotify mentality up, and it's not going to know what to recommend to me because I'm all over the place. Not going to have any idea what I'm doing. All right, I'll put that Heat. I'll put that on the list. What was the one you texted? Didn't you text me one to listen to?
Vertical Horizon.
Yeah. I have that on my list. I have not listened to it yet.
You've got to listen. That is a solid album.
Okay.
Please,
well, please. I do have it on the list.
Yeah, you need to listen to it. It's Echoes from the Underground, 2013.
Okay. All right. I've got that one to listen to. All right. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about Night Ranger today. Just one of those bands that oozes from the 80s. It is. And if you like Night Ranger in the 80s, they are still, we mentioned this a moment ago, they are still going strong. And they still sound great. And they are on tour almost every summer. Either they're on tour by themselves or they're on tour with some of the other bands from that era. They've been on tour with Journey. They've been on tour with REO Speedwagon. They've been on tour with Styx and Def Leppard. And if you get a chance to see them, they still sound great. Their core from the 80s is still together.
Yep.
The big three. Yep, the big three, and they still put on a great show of live music and sound really great. So we saw them last year, right? In Dayton.
Was it last year? Yeah, last year,
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Yeah. So we saw them last year, and so as I mentioned, they're still putting out new music, but the shows that most of the shows they play the older stuff. And
So how many times have you seen them live?
I have seen Night Ranger live, I believe, 3 times.
I have seen them live 3 times as well.
3 times. So I saw them once on a wall on a river wall in Cincinnati.
In the year 2000.
Yeah, way long time ago.
I was there.
Dayton, and at one other time that they opened for somebody, and I can't remember who that was.
Not Dayton. You saw them in Troy.
Troy.
Ohio.
I'm sorry. Troy. I know. I'm not doing my publicity right. Saw him in Troy, Ohio, and I can't remember the other one though.
Yeah, I saw in St. Louis, the wall in Cincinnati, and then Troy. So
yeah. Okay.
But I was thinking that's this. Kiss I've seen 18 times.
Yep.
Night Ranger, I think, holds the second spot on my list of bands I've seen live.
I would go see them anytime that I could. Yeah. I still think they put on a great show. It's very entertaining. I enjoy their music. They have a monster catalog. We're going to talk about their 80s music for the most part today. So pretty much 5 albums that came out in the 80s. You probably know a ton of those songs, except probably the last album, which we'll talk about. But so we're gonna rank that. We'll talk about some of the songs we like on those albums, some of the ones we don't, and then we're gonna rank them. And we'll do as we've been doing. Maybe we'll go start at number 5, and we'll move down or up the list. So number 5 being our least favorite of the 5 80s albums that they released. We'll start with you. How about that?
Okay. Well, this was fairly easy for me.
Yes.
Number 5 is Big Life.
Yes. Yes.
Released in 87.
Mm-hmm.
Listening to it recently, the keyboards were so in the forefront on this album.
Yes.
A little bit too much so for my taste. There's some great songs on there, but as a whole, I don't think it's a great Night Ranger album.
No. Now, one of the songs on there is Secret of My Success from the movie, which I think is a great song. Very fun song. Got a ton of MTV airplay when it would play. I think the rest of the album does not live up to that song or even a Night Ranger album. I think most of the songs on there are forgettable. Now, it was interesting in doing the research for this discussion and looking back, and they switched producers for this album. And David Foster is a music producer that a lot of people, especially in the 80s, would know. And if you are a fan of certain bands, you don't like David Foster because
David Foster only produced the one song.
Oh, he did. Okay. But he was involved. I know he was involved.
Yeah, he was the Secret of My Success. He was the producer of that song.
Oh, and David Foster, but also Kevin Elson, who they had used at that time. And, both of them were involved in like the moving Chicago from the horns band to the, ballad band that they are. And so I don't like what they did with this Night Ranger version on this album. And so when I saw the name, I'm like, oh, that explains it. That's why I don't like it. I like Secret of My Success. I don't like any of the other songs on this album.
Well, Secret of My Success and I Know Tonight.
I Know Tonight. You like that song?
Yeah. Those are the two that kind of stick out to me.
They tried to they released Hearts Away, which they put, this back in the day, there's still an album or a CD or whatever, which is the last song on the album. And they released, I think actually, that might have been the release after Secret of My Success. Obviously didn't go anywhere. Wasn't a great song. It's Night Ranger's story. If you read about all of their albums, and the record label insisted on them releasing their ballads every single album. And
Kelly
so,
Keegi ballad as well. The
yes, yeah,
drummer, yeah.
the drummer, yeah. So
Yeah.
every single album, they fought with their record label. And I think we'll mention that probably every album we're talking about today. They fought with the label, and the label wanted to release a ballad, and there's much better songs on the album. Now, in this case, I don't love them all, but in other albums we'll talk about, they should have released other songs. But yes, that is Big Life. So that was released in 97 or 87. Big album with Michael J. Fox, or big movie with Michael J. Fox. This was the last album with their keyboardist, current keyboard, or their keyboardist at the time, Alan Fitzgerald. And he left the band, but came back and did some other albums later on.
Yeah.
So that is Big Life. We both agree that was number 5. I figured that. I thought some reason I had it in my mind that you like that album a little more, and I was wondering if you'd move that up.
No, like I said, there's only a couple of songs that really stick in my head.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's move to number 4 then. And this is where I was kind of unsure where this would go with you, because there's some albums that are going to be potentially lower for me, but could be really high for you. So let's see. What's your number 4?
Put the album that started it all, 1982, Dawn Patrol.
Dawn Patrol. Okay.
But right. 1 through 4 they're very good albums.
They are. One through 4.
It was hard to rank these 4 albums that we have left.
Yes.
But I put, as a complete album, I would say Dawn Patrol was number 4 for me.
Okay. Yeah. The first side of Dawn Patrol, if we're talking sides, is awesome.
Yep.
I have Dawn Patrol higher on my list. Not at the top, but I would have I had a hard time too. It was like these next 4 were so somewhat interchangeable that I had a hard time where to put this. I kind of ended up with this at like number 3. The one thing is, I was looking at this album and looking at the songs on it. I think that if Sister Christian had been on this album and more people would have bought this album, that it would have been huge, because I think Sing Me Away would have been a monster single if it got recognized the way I just blanked out, the way When You Close Your Eyes did after Sister Christian. Yeah. Because Sing Me Away, I think, is a better song than When You Close Your Eyes. And I think that song, and I know they released it with this album, I think that song would have been huge if it was on the same album as Sister Christian, and Sister Christian was released first.
Having listened to all the albums within the last 5 days, I tend to lean more toward the Jack Blade songs.
Mm-hmm.
I like his voice a lot better than I do Kelly's voice. There was and Jack, both of them actually have pretty good songs. All of them, actually, all the songs are great on this album. The only one I would say is lacking for me is probably the last song, Night Ranger.
Yeah, that's a weird song. I'm not a fan of that song.
It's a masterpiece. So
it's a solid
debut album.
Yeah, solid album. The interesting thing, and I mentioned Sister Christian, and we'll talk about that album in a bit. But that song was ready for this album, and Night Ranger did not want it on this album because they were afraid they would become known as a ballad group, and didn't want that.
And that's what happened.
And that was happened anyways. Now they survived.
Just one album later.
They survived. They probably made a lot of money, and they eventually sort of got out of that moniker. But it was ready for this album, and it would have been interesting if it had been on there, because I think it could have made this album a lot bigger. And like I said, I think "Sing Me Away" is one of my favorite Night Ranger songs. I think it's just a great song. I also love "Call My Name." I think that song with piano and then how it goes into the rocker is awesome as well. On my like favorites playlist that comes on all the time.
I like Can't Find Me a Thrill, Play Rough, Don't Tell Me You Love Me.
Yeah. Now, so they Don't Tell Me You Love Me was on MTV. I don't remember that video, but I had read that. And then they released Sing Me Away. And I think those are the only two really releases did that. Interesting thing is they released this. There's a pressings out there somewhere because their original name was Ranger.
Ranger, yeah.
Yeah, and a country band said, you can't be Ranger because we're Ranger. And so they quickly came up with Night Ranger. I don't know if Night Ranger, the song, existed at that time. But there were some initial pressings of Ranger with this album that are supposedly exist, and I've not seen them. So there you go. Dawn Patrol, your number 4, my number 3. So my number 4, and you'll be disappointed because I know you love this album, is 7 Wishes.
Oh, yeah.
You're okay with that? Okay.
Yeah.
So my number 4 is 7 Wishes, and this is probably the era of Night Ranger at their biggest. So they're coming off Sister Christian, which was this big song, and so this is their follow-up, and they were on MTV every hour of every day for this album, and some great songs. They had 7 Wishes. You had 4 in the Morning. Sentimental Street, which actually I like better than Sister Christian.
I do too.
Yep. And they got Goodbye as well, which is a really good ending song for this album. I think this album is solid all the way through. I don't think I do like Sentimental Street really a lot, but I don't think there's like anything. It's like it's good. I don't know that everything on here is great. Yeah, I know you like 7 Wishes. I remember talking with you way back in the day about 7 Wishes. You probably had
7 Wishes.
Yeah,
I have it as my number 3.
So we're close.
Yeah. Again, albums like this, bring up memories. And being a 15-year-old teenager and just playing this cassette over and over and over and learning the lyrics and singing along with it in my, when I turned 16 and I had my big Chevy Impala and, that just brings up a lot of great memories.
Yes.
And watching the videos on MTV. This, like you said, this was Night Ranger at their peak of notoriety. And
yeah.
So
I don't know why, but whenever I think of this album, I think of like the General Butler Park and the beach area. So at some point when we were down there hanging out, this must have got played because anytime I like think of this is what it's connected to that like memory. I don't know, we went there. I mean, we were there at times, and so I don't know why, but it is connected to something we did at the beach area at General Butler at some point. In that time frame. So, this we talked about it. So this came out in '85, and we became drivers right after that. So this was in the cassette. I didn't have the 8-track of this, so it wasn't until after I got the cassette. They released 4 in the Morning. They released Sentimental Street, and then what was the other one? I think they did release. I don't see it right here, but I think they did release 7 Wishes as a single as well.
They released, well, according to Wikipedia, which it's true. It's got to be true.
Got to be true.
Sentimental Street, 4 in the Morning, and Goodbye.
Goodbye. Okay, so not 7
three singles.
Okay, all right. Well, good. Solid. This was the follow up to the Sister Christian era. A lot of pressure on them. They came through. The one we just talked about, Big Life, was after this, and so that's where they sort of went off the rail a little bit. But this is a solid album. Lots of good songs. Nothing great. I do like Sentimental Street a lot. I think that is a really great song.
Yep, agreed.
That's a really great song. All right. So that was mine. We've covered our 4 and our 3 for both of us. So that leaves 2 albums, right? Yeah, 2 albums left. What's your number 2?
Oh, man, this was really, really hard. I did. My number 2 is Man in Motion.
Yep. That's my number 2. Look at that. We're pretty consistent here.
Man in Motion, it is, after Big Life, I think they got back to the guitar-driven songs and got away from the keyboards of Big Life. And I would say that this album has my all-time favorite Night Ranger song on it.
Oh.
Don't start thinking I'm alone tonight.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That is a great song.
It's a great song. So this album, so you and I were in college together. This album came out when we were in college. So we listened to this album a lot in the car. A lot. we listened to this album together a lot. So in fact, when I think of this album, you're in the memory there of this album because we listened to this a lot. And this is a really good album. This came out at the wrong time, into the 80s, into the 90s. The music was changing. This probably would have been big had it come out in like 87 instead of Big Life. But as it is, and again, I mentioned from earlier, I think the record label screwed them over because it forced them to release I Did It for Love, which is an okay song, instead of releasing Restless Kind or Don't Start Thinking or Reason to Be or Man in Motion, which I think would have been better for their album and their career at this time.
Well, I'm not a record executive by any means, but I would always think you need to kick off your singles as a hard driving song, and then like the second or third single is when you roll out the ballad.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And they were with MCA, and the labels of the day. MCA is not known for their they're the Columbia House of the record labels. I think they were just doing it for fun. Night Ranger got stuck with them, and every time they released an album, MCA would say, "You're releasing the ballad." And so, it's funny if you read anything about from interviews with Jack Blaze or Kelly Key, and they always complain about the record label from those days. But I agree with you. I love Don't Start Thinking, Reason to Be. You can listen to this whole album. It's really good. Some of their other songs can be, they were rocking. These songs, it's funny. A lot of these songs, I think, would fit with some of the music they do today. They sound like this on their albums today.
Right.
They're rocking. Yeah. They're a little more rockier than some of the other stuff. Again, the original lineup's still together here. Actually, they had lost the keyboardist, I think, by this album. Correct?
He had left after Big Life, I believe.
Yeah. He did write at least one of the songs on this album. Co-write.
He actually co-wrote "Don't Start Thinking I'm Alone Tonight."
Yes. So and so they did release "I Did It for Love," and they released "Don't Start Thinking," and that was it. So they've got "Reason to Be" is a really good song. That could have been something, I think. Restless Kind is good. I'm just surprised that, Man in Motion would have been like a rocker to release. But as we mentioned, I think MTV era was switching. The music scene was switching. You had Nirvana showing up on the scene. Night Ranger was not meant to be probably at this time. And in fact, right after this album, they broke up. Not broke up, but they kind of stopped doing their stuff together.
Jack Blades went on to Damn Yankees.
Yeah, so he went to join Damn Yankees. Everybody kind of did their own thing. Night Ranger resurfaced 6 years later, sort of a partial band, and then they got back together in 97 for Neverland. So it was a little bit of a break. I think they were tired of each other, I guess, after 8-9 years in the 80s era with all the MTV stuff, and as big as they were, they needed a break. So Uh, but that was kind of it. So if that was our number,
I Did It for Love was actually written by Russ Ballard,
oh,
who
big songwriter.
who wrote the original New York Groove
Yes.
that Ace Frehley covered later on. So,
yeah, and it was the first single there.
yep.
Yeah. So since that was our number 2, we know the number 1, and it's going to be the same for both of us, is
Midnight Madness.
Yes. Love this album. Love this album.
Well, I originally, going into this, I thought I was gonna put Man in Motion number 1.
Yep.
And then I listened to this album as a whole, and I was like, man, I just can't. I can't. This has to be number 1.
Yeah, it just runs together. The whole album fits together. It is, coming off that first album, they just basically kept rolling. And this is like a little bit of a, maturing of the band and how good they sound. You Can Still Rock in America, Rumors in the Air, Sister Christian is on this album. Touch of Madness is a really cool song.
That's my favorite song on the album.
Yeah, that is a great song. When You Close Your Eyes, I mean, right after following that up, I mean, the MTV play, the album is just excellent. We talk about the memories with that. So mine with this one is borrowing the cassette from you. I never owned the cassette. Borrowing the cassette from you and riding around on my bike, listening to this all the time. And mostly because there's certain songs that you always want to listen to. Listening to You Can Still Rock in America, Sister Christian, and When You Close Your Eyes, and then rewinding and doing it again. Yeah. So, just an excellent album. This one got, this one made them probably, the mainstream band. The Sister Christian got all the way up to number 5 on Billboard. That was their big song. And When You Close Your Eyes got to number 7. And that's why we were talking about earlier, and I'm talking about Sing Me Away. When you compare that song to some of these, I think Sing Me Away and When You Close Your Eyes, that song could have fit right in here as well, with these numbers, and probably gotten a bigger. They also released, I think they released one more song off of this out. The funny thing is you were talking about releasing rockers first. They released You Can Still Rock in America first off this album.
Yep.
Like you should. And then release Sister Christian. Yeah. Rock band, ballad, When You Close Your Eyes. So they were huge. That Sister Christian video, I mean, that played all the time. This was in '83, so MTV was just ramping up big with the I Want My MTV campaign. And so, both Sister Christian video and When You Close Your Eyes were in heavy rotation. So they, at the time, so this album went platinum. Probably it's bigger now, but this was their best-selling album.
My memory of this album, I think I saw them on, maybe it was Dawn Patrol. I saw them on American Bandstand, lip syncing, and I may have had a bit of a man crush on Jack Blades. I loved his hair. His hair was like, it was great. It even got better as even on the cover of Big Life.
You had that hair for a little bit, something close to
I had that hair for just a little short period of time, believe it or not. But I remember watching American Bandstand with Dick Clark. I think it was the first time I laid eyes on Night Ranger, and I was man, that I can't remember what song they did.
So this is you go back to listen to these albums and they're very listenable. They flow together really well. And I would say if you like Night Ranger, going back to that, you can listen to some of their recent music. Since growing up in California, they've released two others since then, at least two others. I might be missing one. But those albums are really good, and I really enjoy them. They don't, of course, there's not hit singles off of those things anymore. They're doing it for their love of music, but really good. I would highly recommend you seeing them if you haven't seen them. They're on tour all the time, going around in large and small venues, depending on if they're touring with somebody. Lots of chances to see them. You should go see them.
I mean, they're kind of like Tesla. Tesla and Night Ranger are like, they are working bands. I mean,
Yes.
here they are. Kelly Keagy is 72 years old.
Yes.
Jack Blades is 70. And I think Brad Gillis is 67. I mean, they're and they're still out hustling and getting on buses and playing small venues around the country.
They sound good. They sound great. They sound great in concert. Yeah, they sound great. It's great band. So that is our top 5 Night Ranger. Pretty in line. I was wondering as we were going to do this, where you were going to throw Man in Motion if you were going to upset the whole apple cart.
No, couldn't do it.
And it's something that I had in my mind. I'm like, I think he loves Big Light. Where is he going to throw that thing?
Nope.
But yeah, great band. They pretty much solid lineup that we talked about. They still have the main 3. Kelly Keagy. We didn't talk about Brad Gillis, their guitarist. They've got another guitarist now in the band, Carrie Kelly. And then Eric Levy has been their good keyboardist since 2011. And then, since Man in Motion, and I won't count the sort of pseudo album they did as not, Jack Blades wasn't in the band because he was with Damn Yankees. But they did Neverland, 7, Hole in the Sun, which is really a rocking album. Somewhere in not Growing Up in California, that's the song. Somewhere in California, High Road, Don't Let Up, and then ATBPO. So, which came out in 2021, so they're still doing new music.
Yeah.
So yeah, since Somewhere in California, 3 albums. So I was missing one.
I mean, I go to Spotify and I listen to those albums.
Yeah,
those newer albums. Too.
All right, and that is our show today. This one we came up with sort of last minute, but I think we were talking about it. So the next one, what did we say we wanted to do?
Well, I think we need to do bands that we believe should have been bigger.
I like that. I needed more research time that I wasn't going to have by tonight. And so we did the Night Ranger because we know this so well. But the next one we'll do bands that should have been bigger. And you could say that about Night Ranger. They probably should have been bigger.
They should have been bigger. They should have. Bigger.
But we won't do Night Ranger since we just talked about them. We'll do some other bands.
Yeah.
But that'll be our next show. Please like, subscribe, tell others, purchase our shirts, which we don't have yet, on YouTube and Spotify. We actually, it is interesting. We've been talking about how to grow our subscribers. If you listen to the last podcast, we said once we got to 100, we would donate to a charity, $100 each. It takes time though. It takes time. We appreciate all of our fans. We appreciate the comments. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate feedback. You want to tell us what you want to hear? We take requests.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do want to make sure that we recognize a Facebook group called Fans in Motion. They're a Night Ranger fan club, and we hope that they listen or watch this. And please give us your comments on what your ranking of the first five Night Ranger albums are. So
yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback. That is a great podcast fan page. I've listened to that several times. They do a good job. So thank you for mentioning that. And with that, we will end the show tonight. again, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Feel free to reach out, and we will be back soon with the bands that should have been bigger.
Have a great night.
Good night.